Continuing education knows that at the end, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we take the time to really listen to their needs and we understand all the different options that are available across the campus for them.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
Continuing education knows that at the
philosophy,
end,
literature, and current events, with a laser focus on seeking the truth and an adventurous disregard for ideological and academic fashions. I'm Matt Burgess, Assistant Professor of Environmental Studies and Faculty Fellow of the Medicine Center here at CU, which is sponsoring today's live taping. My guests are Jose Payo and Lavelle Lewis, hosts of Rochester, New York's Politically Correcting podcast, which aims to challenge narratives and bridge divides in their community, something that we also need in ours. Thanks to our mutual friend Aaron, who connected the three of us and suggested that we have a podcast focused on the issues Americans don't know how to talk about and why we don't know how to talk about them. There's three of us up here. One of us is a Democrat, one of us is a Republican, and one of us is a Canadian. And we're going to let you guess who's who. Needless to say, we're going to disagree on some things, and that's okay. You're probably going to disagree with some things too, and that's also okay. One of the things we hope to do here is role model how to disagree respectfully and constructively. All right, so guys, why don't you tell us, some of the folks in the audience know me, help us get to know you. Tell us about yourselves and your backgrounds, and how did you get interested in politics?
Well, they gave me the look like I'm first up, so, well, I am from Rochester, New York, Lavelle Lewis, father of four. I am self-employed real estate investor, but also a local historian in the city of Rochester. I'm on the board, the Rundell Board for African American Studies, where we are trying to build a historical archive of the great contributions of African Americans to the city of Rochester. One of the things that people don't know or realize about Rochester is the rich history that we have there within that city. It's the resting place of Frederick Douglass. Everyone knows who Frederick Douglass is. But it's also the resting place of Susan B. Anthony. But it's also where a lot of notable Black Republicans were active within that city, trying to build a foundation for African Americans of that time. One of them, notably, was my great-great-grandfather by the name of John W. Thompson. He was a Black Republican that knew Booker T. Washington, knew Frederick Douglass, very close to the Frederick Douglass family, and he's also responsible for erecting the first monument of any African American on U.S. soil back in 1899 of the very person, Frederick Douglass. And one of the reasons why I became a Republican, now we just go ahead and let the cat out the bag of who's the Republican. My reasons is different than a lot of folks may assume, right? A lot of people will probably categorize me as a Trump supporter, MAGA guy, but no. I did my research and learned my history and learned my ancestors' history and seen the work that my great-great-grandfather did as a Black Republican, which inspired me to, make the decision for myself as why I choose this or choose to align this way politically. Now, one of the things that I like to hang my hat on is the fact that I'm okay with holding my party accountable, right? There's a lot of issues that I don't agree with within today's Republican Party, and I'm not afraid to speak out and speak my mind because as a Republican conservative, I understand the importance of the First Amendment right. So I'm going to exercise that. It's how I got into this podcast with Jose, getting him in trouble a lot of times because I'm going to reveal for him, he's the Puerto Rican Democrat. So, but I love discussion, I love conversation, I love educating. I think history provides a huge tool for us to kind of go back into yesterday to understand the context of a lot of racial issues that we have today. I think the whole racial argument is over politicized. It's been weaponized to be used against the very people that they claim to help. And that is, I think, the African American community. But also, it hurts and hinders our white brothers and sisters because, again, knowing where I came from and knowing how that monument was successful to be erected and was recognized all around the world, and the work that my great-great-grandfather did for that. And he did a lot of other things as well. But just to kind of wrap up the reason why I'm here today, I learned that the whites and blacks in Rochester, New York in the late 1800s and early 1900s worked very well with each other. And in order for them to raise that money, which was $10,000 back in 1899, but they were able to accomplish it by the contributions of white Americans. So we're all in this thing together, which is why I'm very grateful to be here and honored to be here to speak with you guys, because Colorado is definitely bright and in a good way, because it's still a community, and everybody, you can tell that everyone is still eager to learn about, new cultures and new people. So from what I've seen so far, that's the energy that I feel so far.
They're eager to learn about Canadian culture, let me tell you, since it's all out in the open now.
Right.
Jose.
Yes, I am not the Canadian. I'm Jose Pio. Also, as they said, I am the liberal Democrat here, pretty traditional liberal. I am much more, not as wordy as my cohort here. I'm very concise with how I talk, and so that sometimes comes off as either aggressive or maybe I'm curt in some ways. I just try to get to the point quite quickly. I was in the military. I was in military intelligence before a lot of it became politicized. I saw the politicizing of our intel, and I got out immediately because I just did not like what I was seeing. I worked on the anti-drug mission down in Colombia, the anti-FARC down there, if anyone knows about the FARC, and did a little bit of the border, helped with the border as well. I am very big on the lens that you put on, right? Everyone has their own lens that they see life through. Me being a military veteran, me being raised in a family that went to church, 3 times a week. I went to the same school I went to church at, so I was at church all the time. I was raised extremely Baptist, went to the military, went to college, and became a Bernie Sanders supporter. So I flipped to the complete other side, and now at this point, I was the belle of the ball for Democrats. I was city councilman elected, beat out someone who was pretty much taking the city down to the ground, in my opinion. I did not agree with a lot what they were doing, and so I just threw my hat in the ring. No one knew who I was. I wasn't a politician or I went to school for it or anything like that. And I was like, I'm just some regular guy that wants to do something, and if no one else is gonna put their name in, I'm gonna do it. So I was like the belle of the ball for Democrats, a Latino business owner, a military veteran. Everything was beautiful up until COVID. And then when I saw a lot of things come through with COVID, and from what I had seen with the military intel and how to view things, I kind of saw some things beforehand that I kind of was pushing back against a lot of what the Democrats were pushing forward in New York. And that made me the #1, hated person in all of Rochester, because I was on the news. Every news station was after me. We can get into that in a little bit. I'm not sure if we're gonna get into the COVID talk, but needless to say, I started the podcast because the media was portraying me in a different light than what I knew to be true, what my friends and my family knew to be true, and I was really tired of it. I was really upset at how the media handled things and how they cut a lot of my talks down, a lot of my points down. I would have to turn in letters to them and say, you messed up this, you misread that, you did that. It was a whole mess. So I started the podcast, and I said, I'm going to start talking directly to my constituents. I represented 50,000 people in my district in the city. I was the only politician with my own app. I created my own app, put money into my own app so that people can actually talk directly to me. And if I had issues that needed to go out there to the people, I was hitting up right on their cell phone. So I wanted to be directly to the people, and I said, I'm not going to go to the media anymore. I'm going to talk directly to the people. Podcast started. Actually, Lavelle was a guest on it a few months later, And it just went so well. I said, Lavelle, just stay on, because I think it's fantastic to see a Black Republican, Puerto Rican liberal to have the conversations that people are having anyways. You're having these kinds of conversations, but a lot of people are turning towards kind of hating each other, or losing friendships, losing family, just because of a disagreement on maybe one or two different topics. I don't like to see that. So I just want people to love each other, right? Everybody love everybody. And so I started the podcast. He came on board. We got a radio show out of it, and now we're here in freaking Boulder, Colorado. I can't tell you how excited I am for this, because it's amazing to at least be able to sit here and talk in front of you. It's a blessing. So thank you so much for being here.
Don't forget that, within the podcast, it's more a laid-back setting. So I offered to bring some Jack Daniels to the party, and I ended up being the only one drinking the Jack Daniels. And then before I know, it's 2 hours later, I'm the only drunk one on the show. So that's probably why I got, invited back.
Although the Benson Center does have a liquor license.
Oh, so we should all have a party right now, like really change the game of this setting.
Yeah. All right. So, Jose, you alluded to something very important, which is that politics is tearing us apart. It's tearing apart families. It's tearing apart communities. It's tearing apart workplaces. Why is it so hard for us to talk about issues at a time when, I should say, on many issues, polls suggest most Americans and some Canadians agree, and on value questions, most Americans and many Canadians agree. We disagree on guns, but maybe we'll get to that.
Let us get to Trudeau, please. Let's not hide Canada, okay?
Why is it so hard for us to talk to each other?
My biggest concern has been that the radicals on both sides have taken over the conversation. The media goes directly to them. It's either you're Trump, MAGA, ultra MAGA, or you're far left, however you want to put them. They get the microphone, and everyone else is sitting there saying, well, these two are both kind of, I don't agree with so much to them. I agree kind of with them, but I find myself right here. But the moderate doesn't get the newspaper article. They don't get the media talking to them. They don't want to hear from a moderate person. They want to hear from someone who's going to cause a ruckus. And unfortunately, the extremes are getting the microphone the most amount of time. And so I think that once it's portrayed that way, and then once we alienate people and we put people into boxes, like I get put into the Democrat box, and I'm like, well, hold on, let's have a conversation so we can talk about this, when I'm around other Republicans. And then when my friends around him.
Before you say that, I'm a different type, though, because I'm like a unicorn, the Black Republican. And just on our show, on our radio show, one of the callers called in. He called me a Black Republican bigot because I didn't align on one issue, right, with the Israel-Palestinian conflict, which for me, I have no problem with talking about controversial issues because, again, I know the history of my ancestors. My great-great-grandfather, who I talked about earlier, John W. Thompson, he was speaking out when Black men were hanging from trees, okay? So we have a different level of fear today than they had back then. So the courage that was needed back then, for me, I'm like, this is nothing, this is nothing.
So I actually have a follow-up question about that. Because if you believe recent polls, you are not a unicorn anymore. There have been some really interesting changes in political alignments, again, if you believe recent polls. So right now, former President Trump is polling at about 20% among Black Americans. Since the 2020 election, his poll numbers have doubled among Black Americans and have tripled among Black American men. There are other interesting shifts. So working class voters and male voters in general have been moving to the right. Female and educated voters have been moving to the left. Among young people, there's a shift where young people are moving compared to where they were to the right, and older people are moving to the left. Mm-hmm. And then within young people, there's an unprecedented polarization by gender. So there's a recent book that just came out that found most young people consider themselves independent, but those that are ideologically affiliated, for those who are high school seniors, conservatives outnumber liberals 2-to-1 among boys, and there's an even larger gap the other direction among girls. What do you think's going on there?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, number one, there's always been a dormant number of, Black males kind of hiding in the shadows as far as politics is concerned. The only time they came out really was for Barack Obama, which I was one of them, until I learned that he, in my opinion, he was a wolf in sheep's clothing with a lot of the stuff that he promised, which we thought we were going to get a Nobel Peace Prize peaceful president, but we got more drones and more other things outside of that administration, and that's my opinion. But I do think that after his election, a lot of black men kind of shifted to the middle. Probably speaking for myself, I was an independent before I went to a Republican. I was actually a registered Democrat before I went over to a Republican. And my shift to a Republican again came based off of my knowledge and understanding where I came from, understanding the ideology of the Booker T. Washingtons, which is pull yourself up by the bootstraps and be an individual. That resonates with me today more so because I do think we need more people that has that mentality of being an individual first. Right, being able to hold yourself accountable and work hard. We're losing that spirit of hard work. So what I think appeals or attracts Trump to black men is that you look at his story, you look at the story of Donald Trump. He is, in a sense, a self-made individual, even though his father was a businessman as well. But the way he carries himself, the way he conducts himself, with contrast to what we have with Joe Biden, and I'm sorry, that does not attract other men and individuals. I mean,
I'm gonna go down that route because it's kind of aligned with what you're saying. The brand has changed.
Yes.
I think for Democrats, we kind of lost who we kind of were. We used to be for the blue collar workers. We used to be able to uplift the downtrodden. And at this point, it's kind of gotten to the point where we are right in line with where Republicans were before, where we're right in line with Big Pharma. We're right in line with the big, tech firms, as well as the warlords in this world. And we kind of lost who we were. And so people are looking at maybe a Donald Trump or even RFK and saying, I don't see myself as someone who's very much pro-war. I'm being prior military. I'm like, I want as much peace as possible. And right now what we're throwing at people is everything is a war. Everything is a conflict. It's a fight every single day just to live. And I don't think people like that right now. But I also think the pendulum also, it moves. And so even though more people are maybe moving to the right now, that doesn't mean that in 8 to 10 years, it won't come right back.
Yeah, JFK would probably look like a far-right extremist today.
Bill Clinton would look like a far-right guy.
Just understanding the ideology of conservatism and what it means to be a conservative. There used to be conservative Democrats. No, this is probably the only one you see that was in office. Well, a lot of your views were totally different from your constituents, and they were more far left. You were more about fiscal responsibility and also just not spending tax dollars for no reason.
Okay, let me throw another surprising fact out there. You, sir, are not a unicorn either. There was Pew just released.
My mom told me I was. All right.
Yeah. Sorry, you're snowflake. You're not special. So Pew just released a major report on American political polarization, and one of the things that was really interesting was that among Democrats, more than half consider themselves to be conservative or moderate.
Blue dog Democrat. That's what they're traditionally called.
So now, a different story in the Republican Party. A large majority of Republicans identify themselves as conservative. But to your point, that I think both of you were alluding to, the path to electoral victory for Democrats requires winning conservatives in a way that the path to victory for Republicans less requires winning liberals, just by the arithmetic of the American demographics.
Does anybody know a mainstream conservative Democrat right now that's talking out?
They would try to put RFK in there, but I don't think he's one.
Tulsi Gabbard was one.
Tulsi Gabbard was.
She was one, and then she left the party, right? And I think that's, again, I think
that was a big loss for us.
It was, and I do think we need a balance. We do need Democrats that do or used to look out for
Joe
the
Manchin.
Downtrodden, right?
Joe Manchin.
Yeah.
Right. So the ability to kind of not allow capitalism to run free, as back in the day. We were just watching something on YouTube yesterday. We're looking at the Rockefeller Foundation and its influence on a lot of things within our country. You know, they had so many monopolies that they were building, and even though there was an attempt to bust up those monopolies, the fines were so small, so minimum. The people still ended up losing. But again, it goes back to what I thought the old spirit of a Democrat was to, again, kind of rein in some of that crony capitalism, which we lost.
I think that's where the conservative is coming into play. I don't think it's conservative values as opposed to, I'm willing to pay these taxes, but I want to see a quality that comes out of it, right? We're spending so much in taxes, and it's going to places that are not beneficial to me personally that I feel. Driving down the roads here, we're paying tolls to get here from the airport. Driving in these roads, holy cow, you would think, it's like landmines. It's like Afghanistan landmines out there. And my city was very similar, very similar. Oh, yeah. You can lose a freaking axle on the road.
Yeah, we drive through the Grand Canyon every day in Rochester.
Right, so to pay all these taxes and then they increase because, we have these big funds that are buying up all these houses in our cities and they're buying it to just turn around and rent it back to our children, our grandchildren. Well, guess what? All of our appraisal values just jacked up. We're paying more in taxes, but yet our streets aren't getting fixed. I think that's where the conservative is coming back to
I was just going to
Democrats.
say that this is why we Republicans can kind of bring in that balance and
here we
hold in
go.
that fiscal responsibility, because again, what we do with our tax dollars, what a Republican wants to do is make sure that you keep your money. You keep your worth. What you do, your merit belongs to you, and it does not belong to the government. So you mix in a little bit of libertarianism within that, the aspect of being a Republican. It's not a bad thing.
But
right?
some people got too much.
So let me ask you guys about a shift that some might interpret as liberal among the Republican Party, and that's on economics. So before President Trump, you would be hard-pressed to find a Republican nationally talking about dismantling free trade. You would be hard-pressed to find a Republican nationally talking about antitrust in the context of big corporations. You would be very hard-pressed to find a Republican, which Donald Trump did at one point in the 2016 campaign, talking about universal health care. And so my guess is that at least some of that must have to do with the fact that the diploma divide, that basically the Republicans are becoming the party of the working class in a way that they were not 15 years ago. But what's your take on it?
No, it's true. But it goes back to other libertarians like Ron Paul, who I think is probably one of the most phenomenal, former politician and also constitutionalist that we have. To where if we follow our Constitution, we also understand and know that we have a Federal Reserve that is not a government entity where our debt or anything that we accumulate tax-wise goes to our debt. It goes to the Federal Reserve. Those things that we as Republicans or libertarians like to kind of point out is that aspect of government being too big, right? We have this notion that our government is looking out for our best interests, whereas now our government is turned into a corporation, and you have Republicans and Democrats who are pretty much signing bills and creating laws that their lobbyists are pushing through, not the people. Our voice isn't being heard.
Right, and I feel like it's gotten to that point to where we're seeing a country, an administration that we don't see this as a government anymore. It seems like there are entities who kind of control the government and are controlling politicians and are putting all their money into the pockets of whoever's running that year, and they're controlling how they're voting. And the only thing that government can come together on is TikTok. Like nothing else they can come together on but TikTok.
Yeah,
Maybe not, right?
Yeah,
Right, but
exactly.
that's insane. That's insane to me that we can't find out how to do bipartisanship anymore. We can't come together and pass bills that actually help the American public. But like you're saying, they're pushing bills that create a bigger government. And I'll be with you on that. I don't want a bigger government unless we have national health care, unless we have family leave, unless we have things that are actually going to benefit us as a total, as a country.
So, Jose, I want to ask you now a question about a specific issue, and that is the issue that is one of the most, if not the most controversial, and also recent polls suggest is now the most important issue to a plurality of voters, and that's immigration. You worked military intelligence at the southern border. You're a Hispanic Democrat. I would guess you have a thoughtful, interesting take on this issue.
Yeah, I think if we're going to talk about this in a legitimate matter, I think most people say we shouldn't just allow everybody and anybody to come through our border. You got to understand that people do want to come to this country. There are legitimate asylum seekers, there are legitimate family men who want to come here, work, and then send their money to their family so that they too can come here. Those people we need to take care of, and we need to have a very big front door for them to come through. But there are certainly people and countries that are sending their people across the border that are going to bring down our quality of life. There are people who are not here for respectable manners. There are people, it happened in Cuba back in the day. They just released their prison into Florida, into New York. They did that on purpose. There's no brain cell in me that says that a country right now isn't doing the same thing. Because when we see people from China, from Venezuela, from countries in Africa that are somehow coming across the ocean in through Mexico and then coming across our border, that's quite the trek to come here illegally when there's no way you came across that ocean illegally. You probably brought a plane across. I think the most common sense says that we can't allow 3 million people to come in per year. Maybe, whatever that number may be, we should definitely discuss that. We need workers in this country. I own multiple businesses. It's very hard to find anyone who actually wants to show up for work. It's insane. They'll show up 1 day, 2 days, and then they'll quit the next day. A lot of labor out there that a lot of people just don't know how to do, roofing, siding, finishing on walls, that there are people all around the world that are very good at and would love to come work in America. And we should definitely welcome them with open arms.
You sound just like Obama back when he was running for office first time.
Look, Obama was the great deporter, right? And we are at the point right now, we have so many people in this country, we can't deport them all. So we have to find a way to integrate them into America so that they are bringing value where they are actually working and not just coming into our country and living off the system. I'm not saying they are, but there certainly are.
So let me ask you both specific questions about policy. So I looked at this and some other issues to see, are Americans as a public actually that divided on this issue? And this is an example of an issue where there's over 2/3 majority support for the following policy positions. More security at the border, more merit-based immigration, permanent status for the dreamers, the DACA recipients. How am I doing?
Well, I mean, I'll ask you this. You're Canadian, right? Like, you guys don't have that problem, correct?
Well, Canadians are known internationally for our smugness, and much as I would love. Also,
your Mounties.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I was gonna show up in a Mountie uniform, and then I was like, wait, they're supposed to guess who's the Canadian. Yeah, much as we're known for our smugness, I have to say, and I do think, I will be smug for a second, I do think there is no country in the world, ever in the history of the world, that's better at doing integration of diverse population harmoniously than Canada, especially big cities like Toronto and Vancouver is right now. Now, okay, I'm going to be humble a little bit as a Canadian. Why is it so much easier for us than it is for Western European countries in the United States? It's because we don't have any land borders with any developing countries.
Or you also understand the importance of protecting your country's sovereignty. Right, like I've gone across the border a couple of times, right? And once you line up, you literally feel as though you're guilty of doing something when you're talking to.
They might just rip up your whole vehicle.
Exactly. So, and one time, I'll tell you this quick story, and it
won't be quick.
Oh, real quick. Trust me. So one time I was, a couple of family members came up to visit in Buffalo when I was living in Buffalo. At the time, my daughter was just born. She was like 4 months old. So it was me, her mom, and my cousin, and we were trying to take him to the duty free. Now, not thinking, right? I thought that we could just go to the duty free, and then we wouldn't have to go across the customs or anything like that, right? We didn't want to go to Canada. We wanted to come back. So once we got into the duty free, we tried to come back, but we didn't have our credentials with us. No ID, no nothing. I thought it was just a quick ride to the liquor store. And it's me, my kid's mom, who's Indian, right? But by way of South America, Guyana. She's Indian. We got a four-month-old in the back seat, 2 black guys. No one has ID. So they had us sitting there for like 4 hours until they could find out where we were from. Now,
Did you consider that racist?
no, not at all. But
Right.
I held myself accountable because I'm like, I should have had my ID, right? This would have been, taken care of a long time ago. Now, fast forward to today, I mean, I could have got away with that twice over. I could have went in, went out, came back with my daughter, got 4 more kids, bring them through, right? But within just to kind of wrap this up, because it's long-winded. Within that, though, for us as a country, we have so many other problems like human trafficking, right? We have a lot of, sexual trafficking with kids. And to me, as a country, that makes us look like we are a part of the problem. We're not creating a solution, and we're not protecting our sovereignty.
And to add to that, you can't go across the Canadian border if you have like a DUI. So I have friends that can't go to Canada with us. They're like, I can't go because I have a DUI 7 years ago. In America, you can come across from Mexico and you don't need to be vaccinated. You don't have to have a passport. You don't have to have an ID. You can just say who you are. They'll let you through, and they'll say, come back in 2 years for your court date. Maybe they might put an ankle bracelet on you. They're allowing people through the border with no vetting whatsoever. So, like I said, this is not the majority of people, but there are some immigrants who are here to do wrong to America. That's not me, but it's the FBI director that said it. The same thing that happened on 9/11. They came across our border. They stayed, underground for a little bit of time until they were called up to do what they had to do. That was legalized immigration. Imagine that on a grander scale of what we have right now. I hate to be like a conspiracy theorist about that, but when you have that many people come across the border from countries that are not very friendly to America, we need to vet it a lot more than what we're doing
Listen,
right now.
Canada shut down that Underground Railroad a long time ago. So
Yeah, y'all don't mess around.
Back in the day, Rochester was definitely right next to Toronto, so we can get in no problem. Frederick Douglass escaped many a times to Toronto. Can't do it no more. No.
Racist.
Now, Canada, I think, does deserve some credit for the Underground Railroad, but returning to the present day, I want to focus on American politics. I don't want to get too
Oh no, but
it is.
This is a podcast, so you know, and we can't just let you off the hook.
Canada's. Unfortunately, I think you're overstating Canada's border security somewhat. For those of you in the audience, Google Roxham Road, Roxham Road. It's a place where people have been able to very easily illegally cross. There just aren't very many of them, again, because our southern borders with the United States.
Not like 100,000.
So it's a challenging problem. I wanna shift gears a little bit and ask you guys the following. I think one of the things that makes extremism powerful in this country is that each extreme convinces everybody else that they're the solution to the other extreme, when I actually think they're best friends.
Yes.
And I first realized this when I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine who's a never Trump Republican, older guy, voted for Gary Johnson in 2016 because he couldn't do another Clinton and he couldn't do Trump. And we were hanging out, and it was July 2020, so Trump was still in office. We hadn't had the election yet. We had the violent protests following George Floyd's killing, and some of the other followed from that. And he says to me, Matt, I think I might vote for Trump this time. And I said, why? And he said, well, I still don't like him, but I'm just really scared of all this woke stuff. And I said to him, it sounds like you think that if Trump was president, we wouldn't have this woke stuff. At the time I was speaking, Trump was president, which was the point I was trying to make. Mm-hmm. If each party was able to sideline its extremes, and feel free to disagree with me, implicitly saying Trump is extreme if you like, if each side sidelines its extremes, would the other side's extreme not just be left fighting paper tigers? And how do we do that, if I'm right?
Well, since you're
right.
calling out the guy I'm going to support for president,
Gary Johnson?
No.
Oh.
One of my reasons for supporting Donald Trump is based off of a lot of the polarization of race and how it was used as a weapon to pretty much discredit Donald Trump, right? Now, a lot of people don't realize that back when Jesse Jackson was running for office, Donald Trump was a huge supporter of Jesse Jackson. Donald Trump was also a huge supporter of NAACP. Donald Trump, when he became president, created the First Steps Act. Donald Trump also, when he was president.
Sorry, just for our listeners, what is the First Steps Act?
So the First Steps Act is a bill that was created by Donald Trump and his administration to provide incentives for incarcerated men in federal prison to earn points or earn an easier, faster way out of prison. So it was more emphasized of giving them a reason to rehabilitate themselves and also earn lesser time for their sentences, which within the numbers of incarceration, and the highest incarceration race within this country, African Americans just dwarf everyone else based off of those actual numbers. So it affected the black community a lot more direct than any other presidents. President Obama didn't address that issue. We saw higher rate of incarcerations for African Americans during the Obama administration. Again, he was the same color. He was also the president that was right from the beginning. The Black Lives Matter movement began under President Obama. So we became more separate as a country during the Obama administration. And then when Trump got in office, it made it easier for the Democrats to find anything to keep that separation, that divide, so that nobody would follow Donald Trump.
You can't blame all Democrats on that one.
Yeah, I can.
I wouldn't go with the
You can't blame
extremists.
Canadians.
The extremists on the left, I completely agree with you that both sides that are very extreme, they are best friends because they want complete upheaval of what we have right now. They don't want to change anything. They don't want to adapt to the new world. They want to completely disrupt what is happening right now. We see it from the right in Congress. We see it from the left in the social climate. They want to completely upend everything and start all over. When there's people who are very much in the middle saying, look, we just need a few tweaks here or there, and we can really have an America that most of us want.
Yeah, well, one of the things that frustrated me about that time and just how they were using the Black Lives Matter movement to create this racial divide amongst people, a lot of the premise of the Black Lives movement had a lot of Marxist communist ideology within it, tearing down a nuclear family, moving people away from religion, moving blacks away from traditional conservative ideals. Now, just because, again, we were talking about earlier, there's a huge difference between being a conservative and a Republican. So most African Americans come from that conservative Republican background, and folks like the Black Lives Matter movement created that extreme within the African American side of politics and pulled more people away from Donald Trump. And it made it easier for them to find that villain, that boogeyman, by saying, yeah, he's racist, he's this, he's that, but there's no evidence.
So, Lavelle, let me ask you a follow-up question about President Trump focused on different issues. Because I know a lot of conservatives say, Trump's record on the economy was pretty good. He made progress on some issues like the First Steps Act that people don't give him credit for. Even during COVID, right? The whatever you think about hydroxychloroquine and bleach and all that stuff, the ivermectin, the Operation Warp Speed, the vaccines, which happened under President Trump's watch, was incredible. And yet, so there's some conservatives I know who appreciate all those things, and then are like, why is he writing on Truth Social about killing General Milley? And why is he cozying up seemingly, and feel free to push back to people like Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, and why is he talking about ripping up NATO? Do you think that he gets in his own way? And January 6th, of course, with
not at all
type of stuff.
Not at all. And I say this because you have to look at who the information is coming from. Right now, why wouldn't you want your president to at least break down the wall with a dictator who throws bombs close to California anytime he wants, when I'm talking about Kim Jong-un, right? Why wouldn't you not want to see why Putin has a problem with all the NATO bases that are surrounding Russia, right? Like, I'm pretty sure if the United States had Chinese warships circling around our peninsulas and on our east and west coast, we will have some sort of feeling about that. So I think there's nothing wrong with a president, practicing diplomacy against our enemies, right? Like, we can't always cozy up to our allies, because how are you ever going to create some sort of world peace, right? I've seen multiple interviews with Donald Trump where he says he doesn't want people to die, right? Like, I don't think that is a bad thing for a president. I think it shows strength. I think it shows, awareness, and there is an attempt for world peace in that sense.
It is a good maneuver to be, keep your enemies closer, right? Keep your enemies close, your friends closer. We have allies. We have people who are against American values. We have people who hate America all throughout the world because of, a lot of times, from what we have gotten ourselves into for no reason. I have to agree with Lavelle on this, that it's not, I don't see it as a bad thing that he was able to go to North Korea. I think that was pretty huge. To broker a peace deal in Israel, Middle East, that was pretty freaking huge. Now, I will say he does trip over his own freaking shoelaces a lot of times, because he just tweets away
More
from the
so
freaking
than the
toilet
guy
seat,
that's
right?
in president that's in office now?
I'm just saying. The current president, I'm not even going to get into that one.
He wasn't talking about literally tripping over
I'm just
shoes.
saying, we talk about Trump, but we also have to hold the current administration accountable as well. And I do think that the Democrats get away with that. They do get away with not being held accountable, because a lot of our media, a lot of our mainstream media is dominated by the left. CNN,
they are the third arm.
MSNBC, ABC, CBS. You cannot find a positive conversation about Donald Trump on any of those channels, which, how are you ever going to bridge any type of gap between not just, the president on the president, but on the local level, to where us within the community, we can have a conversation with each other. But it's hard because someone was watching the 6 o'clock news and got pissed off because they heard Trump say something that was just out of the blue, or just taken out of context, or what have you, that is designed to create that divide and conquer, which, again, for me, knowing that peace is something that I would appreciate, and what conservatives like to appreciate is less spending, no wars, and almost like an isolationist. Like, we should bring everybody back here, address everything within our country first before we go out and just save the world.
So one more follow-up question, and then I want to ask Jose, the Democrat, about college campuses.
Ooh.
But one more follow-up question. So I take your point on foreign policy, and I think people can disagree on that. But what about January 6th and the 2020 stuff? Right now, on the one hand, you could say if January 6th was an attempt to literally overthrow the government, it was pathetic, right? It didn't come close to taking over the military or whatever you actually need to do with the government. Right. But on the other hand, this is one of the greatest, longest standing democracies in the history of the world, the shining city on a hill. And at the very least, January 6th was a symbolic blow to that in the eyes of many people. And a lot of the other stuff surrounding January 6th, the fake electors, all that stuff, many see, including many Republicans, as a threat to democracy. What's your take?
I thought that was an inside job. It was by design. There's a lot of information that's out there to where you look at people who were walking through the Capitol building. They were led by police officials. They were allowed to go in some of these places. And the only people that reacted or agitated, which, not to throw the tinfoil hat on my head today, but we've had so many riots and race riots, uprisings, where the people who were telling us, or who were in control at that time, they're the ones that created or agitated that for whatever agenda, which I think January 6th was an inside job to make Donald Trump look bad, or look as the one who was creating a insurrection within our government.
I don't want to get too far off topic, but if you were to accept the premise that it's an inside job, which I think most people wouldn't, would
you say most? Are you saying within this circle, or most in general around the country?
Let's accept the present premise for argument's sake. Wasn't Trump the president, and so wouldn't he be responsible for anything that's an inside job?
Well, of course he would be responsible for whatever he knew or he initiated. I don't think he initiated or knew or wanted his own supporters to be, number one, incarcerated for just being present at January 6th, right? Not having any actual evidence of them planning or plotting to create an insurrection to overthrow the government. To overthrow a government, like, you really have to have a lot of money.
Joe Biden said an F-16 fire.
You have to have a lot working for you. A lot of folks within the FBI, the CIA, the Pentagon, you would need a lot of cooperation to do that. But you're talking about
Who all
local
reported
citizens.
to President Trump, right?
Yeah, but you're talking about regular citizens who are coming to support their president. And when you look at a lot of the videos, a lot of the agitation were coming from folks with masks on. Now, I know a lot of Republican conservatives that were going through COVID. There weren't a lot of mask wearers. But on this particular day, for some reason, a lot of people with MAGA hats and masks were opening up gates, breaking windows. And you had actual Trump supporters without masks stopping them from doing it. So when I say there's an inside job, you just being a critical thinker, what is your eyes telling you? What are you seeing? What are you watching, right? Don't go off of what Rachel Maddow says, right? Don't go off of what Don Lemon says.
The View.
Go off of what you see and maybe go look at an independent source.
Moving on. I
would like to jump
we only have
on our
15
next
minutes left.
on our next.
This
one,
is a
we'll talk about
podcast.
it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, you
let's
guys,
do the next
you guys
one.
do an episode on this.
All right, cool. I would like to jump on that. Continue.
Okay, please do. And I encourage anybody who's curious. There's lots of information about what went on, and people can look it up and form their own opinions.
Well, let me ask you this before you go off. Tucker Carlson. What is your view on him? As a journalist, as an anchor, what is your viewpoint on him?
I think
Don't think about it.
we could
Just
do
say
a
it.
whole we could do a whole podcast on this. I think he has been effective at putting issues on the agenda that other people won't. I also think that he's the only journalist that Vladimir Putin let interview him for a reason and not a flattering one. And there are many other things I could say, but I'll stop there. We only have 15 minutes left,
go.
so I do want to move on.
Oh, we do? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it
goes quick.
Goes by fast. So, Jose, we were talking about Lavelle and I back and forth about to what extent does President Trump get in his own way. You could have a similar conversation about the fringer elements on the political left. And many people would argue that college campuses are the epicenter of that element. So tell me, you've been an elected politician, Democrat, in a town with a college, but also with a lot of diversity of all kinds, class, race, et cetera. How could college campuses be serving our communities better in this polarized time?
I'm a huge proponent of First Amendment rights. I think that we've allowed college campuses to only allow one voice to come on campus, and they do that with the mentality that, well, we don't want to give this other side a voice. But you're not the purveyors of truth, right? You're not the purveyors of truth. We have to decide for ourselves what we believe in. And there are probably some topics up here that you may not agree with me. We may not agree on other things. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. But the wrong thing to do, and what I have seen from the military intel side of it, is when you don't want the truth to come out, you suppress the information. You make sure that the one agitator that's out in the crowd who looks like he's going to pop up and say something, he has gotten something written on a thing, take him out real quick and don't even let him jump in on anything. So they'll silence people, right? And what I've seen, especially during COVID, was my whole issue was there are people saying things that do not agree with the narrative. Allow them to say it, and then if they're wrong, then they should be held accountable to being wrong. I think people do need to be held accountable to when they are spreading disinformation, when they are saying things knowing to be wrong, or they're saying things with a guess on some things and saying, I believe this is right, this is a fact, blah, blah, and then they're just way off because they're like, Alex Jones on freaking InfoWars.
But
right?
how do you police that because
Because if it turns into like a January 6th, if it turns into something that takes away the rights of somebody else, that's a problem to me.
But nobody, that's the thing. Just using January 6th as an example, there was nothing put out there that started January 6th other than people that wanted it to happen.
I'm just saying a riot. If
Yeah,
it turns into a
right.
riot that people are feeling some type of way about something.
Well, then, what about Black Lives Matter then?
I agree with the same
Now,
concept.
the disinformation that was spread about that was we are living in a overly racist society, and they use someone's death as a reason to promote or create an uprising to where people within their own community was, if I'm gonna just curse for once, tearing up their own shit, right? Like, if you're talking about uplifting your community, why would you tear up your own stuff off of what information you're being told about what happened to George Floyd?
And that's the issue that I see. They were not allowed to talk about anything other than agreeing with BLM. Now, if you said things that didn't agree with BLM, which I know you did during the whole riot situation.
Oh, I went at BLM.
If people were allowed to speak up and actually tell the truth, they would see what BLM really was. I do not support BLM at all. I think they're a terrorist organization. I think they terrorized America for far too long, and they used money and they used emotions to get money from people and use it for their own benefit. To me, that's a terrorizing organization.
And certainly there are differences.
Didn't expect that.
Between there's hashtag, there's people who say the phrase, and there's the literal organization, which, I believe there have been some corruption-related arrests. But against my better judgment, I want to go back to COVID, because you said. You
sure?
Yeah. How much time do we got? We'll start and then continue at the bar.
All right, there you go.
So, because you said a couple of things that are contradictory, I think, but in a way that I think COVID brings out, right?
Okay.
So on the one hand, you said college campuses, you need free speech. On the other hand, you said we need to police disinformation.
When it's found out to be disinformation, if they were wrong.
I
agree
agree with.
Hang on,
I see where Matt is going. I agree with that, because I'm like,
let me go
the
there.
conservative in me is like, that's a slippery slope. You could it's the person's account, the reader. It's your responsibility to understand what you're reading. Or some people just go off the headline. Right, you just read the headline, and all of a sudden,
Okay, hang on. Let me go there. Let me go there.
Right.
So two broad topics, right? One focuses on consumers of information, us, and then the other is on how we should or shouldn't police information. So for consumers of information, how do you when you have a case like COVID where something unprecedented is happening? There's a lot of people in elite positions that are, in uncharted waters. They're making decisions in real time. They're not always perfect decisions, including about information. So, for example, as far as I understand, it's a fact that some people in the medical establishment said really early in the pandemic that mask wearing wasn't effective because they wanted to hoard the mask for the medical professionals. There were people who were saying early in the pandemic that if you think it came from a lab, that's a racist conspiracy theory. And then it came out in Congress recently that those same people were emailing each other like, I think it came from a lab, right?
In the one lab that actually...
There are people, right, as Jon Stewart said, the name of the disease is the same as the name of the lab. Anyway, but and there are other examples, right? When it was conservatives in Michigan protesting was dangerous. When it was Black Lives Matter protesting was great, right? But then, so the point is, I think that that elites earned some of their distrust that they got. But then there were also, I think, people who maybe sparked by that distrust did believe some things that were actually wrong and dangerous. So for example, while there are debates among medical professionals about whether you needed a booster when you've had the disease, the death rates from people in the Delta wave, when it was the first vaccine, were 10 times higher among the unvaccinated than among the vaccinated, right? The hydroxychloroquine, the bleach, et cetera, et cetera. Now we can argue about any of those specific examples, but I'm more interested in the general question: how do you, if the establishment gives you a reason not to trust them, mm-hmm. but sometimes you should trust them, and if you don't, you die. And I'm less interested in whether I have those specifics right. How should consumers of information parse that out when the stakes are so high?
Rely on your own personal knowledge and education, your ability to research, and your trust in God, pretty much. I mean, that's the for me, and I'm not even the over Christian on the panel, but I do believe in a higher power. And your gut, trust your gut, trust what you know, and trust what you've been experiencing your entire life. Like, you know your body better than the government, and the government does not have any right to your body, right? That whole my body, my choice, it runs true with overall vaccinations.
Let me ask you a follow-up question, just really quickly about that, right? So if you go. Because sometimes the level of expertise you need almost feels inaccessible to the average person. Like if I go to the doctor, right, and the doctor says, you have high cholesterol, you need a quadruple bypass, and we could either do it laparoscopically or we could open you up. I'm sorry if that's a totally ridiculous example. I'm not a doctor. But how am I supposed to trust my gut?
Well, you work, again, it goes back to your faith, right? And
what if I'm a heathen?
Let me jump on this one.
well, hold on. I'm starting out. I'm starting
You're
the
gonna
car
take up
up.
10
I'm
minutes,
trying to
I already
turn
know
over.
it.
I'm trying to turn over. Our medical profession is not our medical field is not the same medical field as it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Big Pharma, as we know, has came through and monetized health all the way through, from vaccinations to pills to we have more people who have anxiety and depression and all of these different ailments that we have, and the doctors are there to prescribe you the medicine that's going to fix you. So with COVID, I thought, in my opinion, just by having that background knowledge, I saw this as another money grab. Right? And with everything that they put out there, which we were talking about this yesterday, fear, right? The fear is what initiated everyone's reaction to do what they did. So for me, again, just trusting your gut, you have to do your own personal research. You have to find other independent sources. There's nothing wrong with getting a second opinion. If you go to your doctor and you got an artery blocked, but yet you don't want to go through that surgery, you might want to go seek a second opinion, which is okay.
And that's what happened during COVID, was that they would not allow you to have that second opinion. And they would not allow you to second guess anything. When you asked, can I see the insert for the COVID vaccine, and you got a blank sheet of paper, that was a problem to me. When you were told, no, just go with what this doctor right here on TV says, who has no knowledge of what the hell he's talking about. And this person over here, bunch of doctors from Harvard and from Oxford are getting together and saying, look, there's some irregularities here, this, that, and the other. And they get fucking canceled immediately.
Ooh.
Sorry. and they're freaking
This
their
is a
license,
children's program.
Yeah,
this is
sorry.
right.
And their license gets taken away immediately. That's a problem to me.
That's a
That was
problem.
immediate problem to me.
Okay, so we only have 4 minutes left. So without going down the rabbit hole,
I had to throw
of
the F word in there
specifics
somewhere,
of
sorry.
COVID. Hopefully the censors were on top of that.
Yeah.
Free
speech,
but
baby.
speaking of censors, right? You said earlier that we should police disinformation, and yet you also said that you don't like how we were policing disinformation.
Right. So what I'm saying is, when you're found to have,
like Lavelle's saying,
when you are found to have given wrong information and you did it knowingly, Dr. Fauci should be in prison.
well, who decides what's wrong?
When we come out and find out his emails to people, when he said, I believe this isn't the truth, yada, 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 and he tells other people, they find the facts, and they find that he was freaking putting the money into Wuhan, and he was funding that research. And it all comes out there.
Yeah.
Fauci deserves prison.
Fauci's track record speaks for itself. He was also ahead of the HIV pandemic, right? When that came out, a lot of the things that he unrolled, he revealed to the public, is the same thing he did with COVID. So Fauci was there for a reason. He is not a practicing doctor, but yet we place him up here because he's been in this role before.
Just quickly by way of background, and then I want to ask one closing question for one at a time. Just quickly by way of background, I think that just for our audience who doesn't know the inside baseball here, I think what you're referring to is Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was the COVID czar, but was the head of the NIAID. And in 2018, there was a grant proposal to insert for somebody from, I think, the EcoHealth Alliance to basically U.S. money may have gone to Wuhan to
NIH,
to fund
Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Hang on, to fund a research that might have included inserting a furin cleavage site into a coronavirus, which is one of the signature aspects of COVID. And if that grant proposal had gone through NIAID, Dr. Fauci would have had to approve it. Is that basically what you're talking about? Just,
Follow the money.
Just for those who
Absolutely.
who are
Follow
talking
the
about
money.
what
And when the
allegation is.
coronavirus came from Wuhan, from the same lab, and
I
he
never
sits there
said
and
that.
says that is disinformation, they're being bigoted, they're being racist, I didn't fund it, yada, yada, and then comes to find out all of that was wrong, that's disinformation. That's not misinformation. That's disinformation. He lied to the American public.
Okay, without getting into specific, I don't want to get sued. So without getting into specific
I'll be like,
questions
Kanye,
about
sue me.
specific people, and whether or not they've committed crimes, we got 2 minutes left. So if you're, I don't actually know. Are you two parents?
I am
Yes.
a parent. Yeah,
Okay.
I got 4
All
kids.
right.
Stepdad.
So you're both parents. So am I. Right?
Awesome.
So your kids are coming up into this world where there's super high polarization. There's, high polarization by gender. There's all this information, which in some ways is great because there's lots of second opinions, and there's also some ways not great because some second opinions that you can find on the internet are crazy, right? And you want, you want your kids to be productive citizens that help us lower the temperature, not raise it. What do you tell them?
Well, first of all, you definitely have to have faith in your kids and understand that there's a part of you within that child, right? So for me, I got a 24-year-old that's it's Stony Brook. He's about to be a doctor, physical therapist. I got a 19-year-old who has ambitions to be a lawyer. She's at the University of Buffalo. And I got a 15-year-old who wants to be an anesthesiologist. And my 12-year-old son, I don't know what's going to happen with him, but what I do know is I don't underestimate their ability to understand and interpret what's going on. So my oldest son, he told me one time, he's like, you know what, Dad, what we should do? Anybody in Congress should wear a patch on whoever donated to their campaign
A NASCAR
all throughout
jacket.
their candidacy. So we know who donated to their campaign. So for me, that gives me hope saying, okay, my son has the ability to critically think about what he sees in his elections and base his opinion on, that Congress does not work for us. My daughter, she is pro-Palestine. She's a feminist through and through. She's a 19-year-old hard rock. She will curse you out, and I see myself within her in a lot of aspects. My other daughter, 15-year-old, I don't care. She doesn't care about anything. She doesn't care about nothing unless it's something about her. And my son, my youngest son, Fortnite. So the only thing I can do is when they come to me with questions, just be there to either educate them and let them get it wrong, right? Like I thought I knew everything when I was 18, but I got it wrong in my opinion. So I don't really walk around and be afraid of what my kids may say, even if they're right or wrong. I'm just there to kind of help them and guide them to the right direction.
Jose, what do you tell your kids?
Along with Prime Time said earlier, Deion Sanders, be an individual. Be the person that you believe you are, and I'll support that as long as it's going to create a better future for you. If you're going to make decisions for the short run that's going to mess up your long run, then I as a parent need to step in and make sure you don't make that decision. But other than that, be your own individual person. Do not follow a crowd. Do not go with what the in crowd does. Be who you are, and we'll support that all day.
Great. Well, thank you both very much. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed
Come
what
out for
you
drinks
heard,
after. We're gonna go out for grab
Hopefully
drinks.
you have all that hair after this.
If you
you're not-
enjoyed what you heard, check out the Politically Correcting podcast. Check out the Free Mind podcast. What's the website?
We got our
URL?
Facebook page, our Instagram page, Politically Correcting Podcast. Go to each one of them. We go live every Monday and Wednesday, 1 o'clock p.m. We're on the radio.
WYSL.com.
Right? You won't hear any F words there.
No. The owner of that radio station, Bob Savage, he's a freaking Hall of Fame radiocaster. He's been in the business for years. He's a doctor.
Much more professional than
yes,
us.
much. But he also adds
More
another
like you.
element, older gentleman, and we need more people like that. We need more older folks, younger folks, and alike to have these conversations.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you, guys.